put the information about putting question. I
did post it once at 6:48, but I can post it again.
I see that. Okay, I think you're golden with that.
Okay.
I have Ed looking over my left-hand shoulder.
So, Bill, are you going to be eating dinner off camera?
I have no idea. I actually might not be eating dinner. My wife was watching Fox News, and they were talking about President Trump in the grandest of terms, getting the military out to quell the LA riots, and I made some disparaging remarks about Trump and our dictator, and the last thing I knew, she went upstairs.
As somebody brought up this morning, it's a big diversion. Nobody's talking about the big bill anymore. They're talking about LA.
It is. Ed's going to be talking about the big bill.
Yeah.
You know what? I see it's 7:01, but you know what I found really interesting? I looked at when Elon left the White House versus when SCOTUS decided to give them DOJ permission to get our information, which is the 30th, I believe he left. And on the 6th of June, they gave him permission. It's like, is this also a ruse for possibly that? I don't know.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
all right, let's let him in.
Okay.
And then Christine, if you could turn off the waiting room and the bells, that would be great.
Yeah. But at least as of right now, despite this group of people continuing to accumulate,
better mute all, Bill.
For the moment, it appears to be quiet, somewhat calm.
Sorry, Jim. Just Millie.
All right, we have muted everybody. And Ed, you're going to want to unmute, as I muted you.
I just did.
Okay, great. I know you've all heard me say this 100 times, but I just love it when the screen starts filling up with the Hollywood squares, and you guys are the Hollywood squares. And there's Lillian. That is just great. And I can see Judy. Hey, Judy, and Richard. Just a whole bunch of folks. So that is just great. We're going to turn on the AI summary so that we have a kind of a recap of what's happening here. And I can see, I see Jeannie Sutton's got her icon on. That looks great, great. So we'll be starting in a second or two. Ed, why don't you kind of take over here?
Bill, are you going to videotape?
Yes. Christine, can you turn on the video?
Being streamed to YouTube.
Oh, okay. So you've got that handled already?
It's already running.
Okay, great. Great.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're going to talk about the reconciliation bill this evening. I think that before we get started, though, I think we'd like to have either Bill or Jim tell us a few words about our sponsor here, Northwest Suburban Organizing for Action. Do we have the snowflake that you guys can put up and tell people who we are? Looks like it's coming up.
I'll let you know in a second. This is always a challenging thing.
All
right. Let me know if you can see it.
I don't see the snowflake yet. I just see our logo.
Okay. Well, let me just kind of introduce ourselves. We are NWSOFA, Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We are not NWSOFA. We're Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We're an indivisible chapter. We are one of what we heard the other day was 2,300 chapters, growing by 5 to 10 a day, new chapters out there. We exist with all of our leads and all of our programs to help our members, you guys, everybody on this call, to understand the facts, sharpen your arguments, and communicate to folks that you're discussing issues with. And we do a lot of different ways. You can see right in the center of the screen, we've got this big, beautiful, ugly bill that Ed's going to be talking about. But on the perimeters here, there's a lot of new things that we're doing. We just started, we'll start tomorrow actually doing sorting soup, which is a decompression hour at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where literally we'll be talking about action plans from our coffee and conversation that we have at 9 a.m. every morning. I just noticed that it says 10 on the slides here. Also, as a new group, we're doing a program that is called Vision Forward, our pro-democracy vision, which is just kicked off last week. And that is really kind of establishing what we should be talking about as we do the elevator speeches and when we communicate with folks. And then another group that we just started called Sharing Our Stories. It's SOS. We just started that a week or two ago, and that is at 7 o'clock. It'll be once a month. And it's a place for people to share their stories about what this big, beautiful bill and what DOGE has been doing that are affecting people around the country. Really, really solid. And then we've been doing an AI working sessions, hands-on sessions at 2 o'clock every Wednesday, and then noon every Thursday. This week, we'll actually be doing a hands-on working hands session on Zoom. How to use Zoom to communicate with your members and people that you do Zooms with. And also on Wednesday night, we're going to be doing the No King's Day. We're going to be working with rally songs and marches, getting prepared for the big act. So just lots of things that we're doing. NWSOFA has now, I think we started maybe 13 years ago with a total of 17 members. We now have 8,900. We just added a few more this last week. And we are organized on the dual snowflake principle. On the right-hand side are all of our issue teams. On the left-hand side is our communications team. So you get all of the annoying emails and texts and everything from the communication, and you get all the great events and Zooms from the turquoise side. And running this organization is 24 all volunteer leaders. They work on both the communication and the issue teams, which is really the secret sauce of our group. Tonight, we're going to be working with ROD, Restore Our Democracy, and Ed Spire will be presenting, and Jim McGrath and Debbie and Christine will be co-hosts along with me, working forward here. So tonight, it's all going to be about exposing the big, ugly bill, our threats to our economy and our democracy. Ed, it is all yours.
Well, thank you, Bill. Now, first thing I want to say that when we're done with this presentation, there's a lot of slides, and we're not going to read all of them in depth. We're not going to look at all of them in depth. We're going to send the slides out to everybody who's registered. And Bill, when we send the slides out, everybody's registered, I hope you'll also send that screen that was a 3x3 of all the different activities with links on them, so that if somebody saw something they wanted to get involved with, that they'd have the link along with the slides we're going to send.
Great
okay,
idea.
let me share my screen, and we'll get started talking about this stuff. Okay, you see the screen now, right?
It's up.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about what the GOP says the goals for this bill are, and what the cost for those goals would be. I did a review of each major section of the bill, and that was a ton of work. It's an enormous thing. I downloaded the official document from the congressional website. I read through it. It's mind-numbingly long. It's 1,000 pages. I used an AI tool to summarize sections of it. And even those summaries are just, and part of the problem with that is that the bill touts itself with grand language, and you just can't believe everything you read in the bill. So we have to go further than just reading the bill. We have to look at the benefits that they claim. We have to look at the criticisms of the bill. We're going to talk about how it was passed in their House. Most importantly, we're going to talk about the prospects in the Senate, where we have some ability to do something about this. We'll just mention some of the external factors, the marketplace response to the bill, and what can be done is going to be very important because we need to do some stuff here, and I'll show you what we can do. So it's a long presentation, and there's pages and pages and pages talking about what's actually in the bill. And I'm not going to stop on every page and look at them in depth because it's just too long. You'll get the slides. If you want to read the thing thoroughly and understand every little thing that's in this bill, you'll have the opportunity to do so. I'll stop on a few of the slides where I've highlighted some things that are really important, but I want to get further than just looking at the bill. I want to get down to talking about the criticisms of the bill and the likes. And the other thing about these slides is that this is a suggestion that Jim made. In a lot of the slides, you'll see these little blue numbers. Those, okay, I mentioned that I used an AI to create summaries of sections of the bill. And the AI puts in links to the web pages or sections of the bill that it's referencing. So when it says something about reducing government spending and regulation, blah, 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 you can click on these links in the slides you're going to send out, and you can see the websites that or the sections of the bill that bring forth this content. So all those things will be live links in the PDFs that you get. So when I look at this thing, what the GOP says about the bill is that it's really great. It's going to extend and expand tax cuts by making permanent the tax cuts that he put through in his last administration. And they think those will promote economic growth and promote job creation. And they're very happy to increase military spending and border spending. I will say that the border crossings are down, and if the people who care about seeing the border crossings being down, they're probably pretty happy with that. So he is doing that, but they're spending right now. They're spending more money than they have budgeted. There was a thing recently in Congress where one of the heads of one of the heads of Homeland Security was saying, it was being grilled, and they were saying, you're spending more money than you have in your budget. You're going to run out of money for the year before the year is up. So they're putting through big increases for that kind of stuff. Reduce government spending and regulation. The conservative side of our country always wants to see a smaller government, smaller taxes. They're advancing their America First agenda for delivering on President Trump's promises. And when they use budget reconciliation is a process whereby they can get this thing through without a filibuster in the Senate. So, they emphasize job creation, higher wages, strengthening national security. But there are some divisions within the party, within their party over all of this stuff. Especially the impacts of increased federal deficit, the possibility that there'll be reductions in Medicaid funding, which would hurt a lot of their constituents. But they remain focused on their goals, and they talk about in the bill. They talk about their goals as being really good things. So just reading the bill is not enough, because you have to look at the costs. And when you look at the costs associated with, we could see 11 million people lose health care coverage with what they're doing. We could see $2.5 trillion more added to the federal debt. We could see 18,000 people die because they don't have the same access to drugs they had before when they lose prescription drug subsidy. That's part of what's in this bill. There are some real costs to this bill, and as I mentioned, just reading the bill doesn't really tell me everything. So I go out to trusted people that I know, that I've read about, that I've followed. And Heather Cox Richardson is one of the most respected historians. And when she says something about a bill like this, it really speaks to me. This is what she's got to say about this bill, that it really doesn't have there's almost no waste, fraud, and abuse being cut here. The cuts they're making aren't waste, fraud, and abuse. The cuts they're making are taking health care away from people. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that at least 10 million people will lose health care coverage. Johnson has claimed that those living coverage will be unauthorized immigrants, but that's basically a lie. That's not who's losing coverage, because unauthorized immigrants aren't eligible for federal money for Medicare. If there's any unauthorized immigrants in some states that are getting health care, it's state money. It's not federal money. Because 14 states do use their own money to provide health insurance for undocumented immigrant children. 7 of those provide coverage for undocumented pregnant women. But none of that is federal money. So there's no federal money going to non-citizens. Instead, the bill pressures those 14 states to stop doing that by reducing their funding. They claim that it will reduce deficits. That's not true. It's not going to reduce deficits. It's just an out and out lie to say that. They claimed that it would be the largest deficit reduction in nearly 30 years. And that's just nonsense. It has none of since Reagan, since 1980s, all these claims that lower taxes would lead to higher tax revenue, that's never happened. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the tax cuts and additional spending could increase the federal deficit up to $3.8 trillion. And that's those are reliable numbers. And people like Mike Johnson in the House just discount it by claiming that the people that are doing these countings are just politically biased. Republican cuts to government programs are just a dramatic reworking of what we traditionally do in this country. We traditionally use evidence to decide what we're going to do and whether it's going to help people or not. These people are not basing anything they're doing on any evidence. They're just basing it on their ideologically driven ideas that boil down to concentrating wealth and power in the hands of few. And it just denies that government has any role to play in helping our citizens. And you know what? People that just watch Fox News are really unaware of most of this. This guy's recently studied what Fox News talks about. And in his period he looked over, he saw they mentioned Medicaid just once, but they talked about former President Joe Biden 40 times. So it's just a really dramatic cuts to important areas, cuts to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that was established by Congress. It's the way we keep track of weather conditions, storms, so that we can warn people that there's going to be a hurricane coming in. And they usually provide over 30 billion benefits that enable farmers, fishermen, business people, schools, individuals to plan around weather events so they don't get whacked. And as soon as they took office, they started a hiring freeze and started firing these people. And that's going to make a group like NOAA unable to function. And in fact, recently, they've been scrambling to rehire a lot of the people they fired. Cuts to the National Weather Service already mean fewer weather balloons, less data. We're running a country now without data, with just somebody's idea of how it's right. 15 offices in the Gulf of Mexico, a region vulnerable to hurricanes, are understaffed. They've lost 600 employees. The Hurricane Center in Miami is short 5 specialists. 30 of the 122 stations no longer have a meteorologist in charge. 7 of those stations don't even have staff to operate. The proposed budget. Now, those are all cuts that Trump and his Doge guys made unilaterally without talking to Congress. And the budget proposal they sent to Congress asks them to make those kinds of cuts permanent, cut 25% or more out of NOAA's funding. The FEMA is another story just like that. The lack of funding expertise there is taking its toll. They were baffled by the new head of the agency saying he didn't even understand that there was such a thing as a hurricane season. He has no experience with disaster response. And the proposed cuts to National Institute of Health are even more draconian. And they're pushing a budget that would make these kinds of cuts permanent. Cuts include 40% of the National Cancer Institute. And at the same time, they're wanting to cut all the biomedical research at universities. You know, our country is economically strong in part because of the kind of research we do that leads to modern products and world-class industry-leading products. Without the kind of research funding that the government has provided, the government built the structures that allowed us to do these things, and now they're tearing it all down. Well, like I said, I looked at the whole bill. There's 11 major sections. And I got slides in here on all of them. I'm just going to rip through them very quickly because it's just mind-numbingly boring to try and read all this stuff. Agriculture, and the way this works is every subcommittee, every committee in the House gets their whack at things. So the Agriculture Committee comes up with their parts, and their part, one of the big things they have in their part is work requirements for people that are going to get support from the government. And we're going to talk about work requirements when we get to the summary of this area. They talk about nutrition. They talk about investments in rural America. I mean, this sounds good. Investments in rural America. We want to see investments in rural America. They talk about the armed services. That's another committee. Military quality of life enhancements, shipbuilding, naval modernization, air and missile defense, munitions and cybersecurity. I mean, all the stuff sounds like the stuff we probably should be doing. Air superiority, focusing more on the Pacific, border support, heavily invested in modernization and expanding U.S. military capabilities. There's a committee on education and workforce that talks about things like Pell Grants, regulatory relief. There's a group on energy and commerce. And the most important thing in that section is that they're rolling back many of the climate and environmental initiatives that came along with the Inflation Reduction Act, so that they just don't want to spend money kickstarting new industries that will cause us to be leaders in green energy. They're going to rescind funding for several of the Inflation Reduction Act programs, particularly those related to clean energy and climate initiatives. They're going to rescind funding to a wide array of environmental climate programs, including clean heavy-duty vehicles, air pollution reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, all the stuff that we're working hard to do to turn around the environmental problems we got with global warming. They just they don't want to spend any money on that stuff. So there's just every time you look at things, things pop out at you. Here's another one from the Energy and Commerce Committee, where they require states to establish Medicaid work rules, and they want to sunset federal funding for new Medicaid expansion. So, you know, the ACA allowed states to expand Medicare with additional federal funding, and they want to just put an end to that completely. It just goes on and on and on. The language here in this one is designed to block federal Medicaid and CHIP funding from going to organizations that provide abortions. So, and this is an area that's important, because one of the things about a reconciliation bill, and we'll talk more about this as we get going, one of the things about a reconciliation bill is it's supposed to be focused mostly on budgetary issues. And when they come along and they say, we're not going to allow them to spend money on abortion services, well, that's not primarily a budget issue. That's primarily a policy issue that they're trying to sneak in as a budget-related issue. And we can contest that kind of thing, and we'll show you how later. There's a Financial Services Committee. There's a Homeland Security Committee. There's a Judiciary Committee. There's one of the important things on the Judiciary Committee that popped out, it's really clear, is that they have language that bars the federal government using any funds to pay to enforce a contempt judgment against the administration, kind of saying that the courts can cite the government as not following the law, but nobody is allowed to spend any money to try and enforce that judgment. This kind of thing, once again, is something that's not, it's a policy decision. It's not primarily a budget decision. And it's a policy decision that just builds on top of the immunity decisions and says that Trump can do whatever he wants and nobody can do anything about it. So that's got to come out. And we're going to talk about how we can get that kind of stuff out. There's a Natural Resources Committee. There's an Oversight and Government Reform Committee, Transportation Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. This is an important committee. The Ways and Means Committee is basically the one where they can do the primary budget stuff and the taxes. And so they have a bunch of sections. They have a section that bill locks in or expands. This is the thing that causes most of the deficit. Bill that locks in or expands the provisions of the 2017 tax law. That tax law was a temporary law. It was designed to expire, and now they want to make it permanent. And we'll talk a lot more about that. They have a correction. That's a section they call "Make American Families and Workers Thrive," which makes once again, it makes permanent the key provisions of the tax cut, including lower individual tax rates, which are mostly for people that make a lot of money, increased standard deductions, expanded child tax credit, which is kind of a good thing, higher estate tax, gift tax exemption, which is not a good thing at all. This just goes on and on and on. Make America Win Again has something that adjusts excise taxes, including a reduction on the taxes on firearm silencers. Why is that in this bill? It's a prime example of something that's a policy bill, a policy issue that isn't really a primary budget issue. They're just trying to sneak this through on us. So you'll have all these slides. You can look at this stuff in depth if you want to. But the basic benefits that they're talking about is they expect the tax relief to cause a lot of economic growth. There's tax measures in there, like suspending tax on tips, no tax on overtime. But those changes are temporary. The changes that they made last time, they want to make permanent, are not for the middle class. They're for the upper class. The things they have in here for the middle class are temporary. They say there's going to be deficit reduction, which is nonsense. They say that their cuts to Medicaid and SNAP are going to help pay for the tax deductions. They talk about national security and how important that is, blah, 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 blah. They talk about housing reforms, make it easier for developers to build affordable housing, especially in rural and tribal communities. And there's very important that they include a debt ceiling increase. We have to do the debt ceiling increase one way or another, and that's one of the major things that's going to run up to a problem in the Senate. So there's a lot of messaging here, and a lot of messaging which is just false. They're messaging that the bill doesn't add to the deficit. That's just nonsense. And if you look at the changes they're making, if you look at where they did DOGE layoffs, where they're doing budget increases, where their budget calls for Senate for Congress to formalize and make permanent the DOGE layoffs, the cuts are being made in areas that express liberal policies that have been put in place by bipartisan laws in Congress that have had some support with the liberal sides. And the increases they're making are all on the more conservative sides. So there's all kinds of cuts in the more liberal areas over here. It's hard to read some of it, like we have the EPA, NIH, USAID, Department of Education, things that help people are being cut. And over here, all the things that are being increased are ICE, CPB, National Nuclear Security Administration, there's a whole bunch of areas over here that are getting increases that are all the conservative priorities. So their stuff is very very biased. And there's a link to the study behind this right here. When you get the slides, you can click on that link if you want to read this study in depth. So if you want to talk about the criticisms of the bill, there are criticisms all over the place. The health coverage and social safety net, the deficit, the tax policies. Let me just run through these a little bit. The CBO, which is nonpartisan despite what they say, says it's going to be at least 11 million fewer people having health coverage. And there's new paperwork barriers, which reduces eligibility for certain groups, including some immigrants and those with paperwork issues. And there's increase of out-of-pocket costs. And that is expected to hit the Obamacare marketplace as well. It's not just Medicaid. It's the Obamacare marketplace is being hit by this as well. And there's provisions that are going to hit nursing homes, are going to, by capping home equity limits, blocking implementation of new nursing home staffing rules, which will lower the quality of healthcare for our citizens. The social safety nets are being hit. They're taking money out of the food stamps, which is SNAP. The Nobel Prize-winning economist publicly opposed this bill, warning that these cuts that they're going to do this to offset the cost of their permanent cuts, but they will not benefit the most vulnerable. It could worsen economic inequality, which is already quite high. The bottom income quintile is projected, bottom 20% of our people projected to lose about almost $1,000 in spending capability in the next year, while the top 10% of our earners would receive about 70% of the bill's total benefits. The deficit would spike at least $3 trillion over 10 years, and that's largely because tax cuts outweigh the savings that they have, outweigh them greatly. Critics argue that the fiscal approach is just unsustainable. It increases debt while failing to deliver broad-based economic. And the marketplaces, the Wall Street is seeing this stuff, and Wall Street is reacting to this stuff, and you'll see that. The tax policy they want to extend the 2017 tax cuts to make them permanent. They want to introduce new tax exemptions for overtime pay, for tips, for loan interest, and the likes of those, but those are not permanent. Those expire in a few years. And it makes the tax code less neutral. It further favors non-corporate business, pass-through type business over corporations. There's a host of new complicated rules that increase compliance cost. And it makes education less affordable. It extends the loan repayment periods. It raises the minimum payments. It dismantles consumer protections. It adds new complex rules for student aid. It's going to be harder for people to get funding to help them through college with this bill. It's phasing out the investments we've been making in clean energy so that we can become leaders in a new area of industry that's critical to our world. And there's a bunch of hidden provisions. We've already run across them. Restriction on judicial enforcement against the government, delay and weakening nursing home oversight, erosion of democratic norms and legal protections. It allocates $80 billion for expanded immigration enforcement, including construction of detention facilities, hiring more agents, and it specifically prohibits the use of these funds for legal access programs or legal services for immigrant children. And this is all going to enable the kind of more aggressive, abusive enforcement actions that we're seeing happening. We're seeing them happening now, and we're seeing people like in Los Angeles taking to the streets, and aghast at what they're seeing happening in our own nation. The Medicaid cuts would have big impacts on rural hospitals. Loss of coverage, increased uncompensated care costs. That's going to hurt rural hospitals. People out there who lose health insurance, rural hospitals will face a surge in uncompensated care by people who need help. They go to the emergency room because that's the only thing got available to them now, and that means the hospitals are harder to pay staff, maintain services. And there's going to be tax restrictions that will restrict states' ability to use tax providers And that's a key mechanism for financing Medicaid in nearly every state. That would make it harder for states to implement Medicare. And once again, this is all going to hurt rural hospitals. And the rural voters who voted for this administration are going to be hurt by this. They're going to curtail retroactive Medicaid ability from 90 days to 30 days. The rural hospitals already operate on very thin margins. They serve populations with high rates of Medicaid dependence. The cuts to this funding is going to hurt these people, and it's going to have economic ripple effects. The closure of a rural hospital has broader economic consequences. There's one of the largest employers in these rural communities. Hospital closures will lead not just to loss of care for citizens, it'll lead to loss of jobs as well. The advocacy groups here are very clear that this bill is a disaster for rural hospitals. The Senate's as requesting expert analysis. This is one of the points we really need to push on with our senators. There's broad consensus among rural health advocates, hospital associates, policymakers that this bill is going to be disastrous for rural hospitals. And once again, when you get the slides, if you want to read about this more in depth, you click on these numbers, because these numbers are the sources where these statements are coming from. Now, they say they expect higher growth because of tax cuts. Well, that's never happened. I mean, there's a short-term effect. There can be a brief bump of higher growth. There was a brief bump of higher growth after the 2017 tax cuts for the first 2 years. But the real median house income did rise. Unemployment reached historic lows during that period. So there are some short-term effects. But in the long term, it doesn't work. In the long term, everybody who's looked at this thoroughly says that the GDP growth improvement was less than 0.5%, 0.2 of a percentage point of increased growth, far below the levels promised by the people that sell these ideas to us and are selling them to us right now. Business investment didn't increase much, and right now, business investment is going to go nowhere as long as these tariffs are questioned. You can't decide to build a factory in Mexico, and it's useless because the tariffs are there and hurt you, or you build a factory here, and that might be useless because the tariffs are gone. We're not going to get business investment, no matter how much tax cuts you get them, when these tariffs are so questionable. The businesses can't plan for the future because they don't know what's going to happen with these tariffs. The GOP expects this higher growth. That's never happened. The national debt increased $2 trillion over 11 years due to the thing he did during his last administration. Growth in GDP and revenue was nowhere near sufficient to offset the revenue taxes. This promised rocket fuel to the economy never happened. There's no reason to believe that this time will be any different. And in fact, with analysis by the House Reconciliation Bill, shows that the most improvement you could get would be less than 1% of growth. And that's very small compared to what these guys are claiming. And most of these things, most of the pro-growth divisions, bonus depreciation, those are temporary. They're set to expire, which means they can't have a long-term effect on growth. Most of the benefits from the tax cuts accrue to the higher income households. The lower and middle income households are seeing smaller gains. And in fact, in some cases, they're seeing losses. To summarize, tax cuts could provide a short-term economic boost, but the historical evidence shows that the magnitude of growth, investment, and revenue gains has always fallen way short of their projections. The last time they did this, it just didn't deliver. It's not going to deliver this time either. So here's a financial summary of this big, ugly bill. The red areas are areas where we're going to increase our deficit. Mostly, the extension of the tax cuts that he did last time is where most of our debt comes from. The temporary tax cuts on overtime and tips, that's a little bit of a loss in revenue. but it's nothing like this loss. There's some increases in our defense spending. There are increases in our homeland security spending, but most of the increased spending or loss of revenue, these are spending, these are spending, these are loss of revenue. All that contributes to a deficit. Most of the deficit contribution is from the tax cuts. Now, there are some savings, minimal, tiny, trivial savings in energy and finance and federal employees, national resources. You start to see a little bit of savings, other healthcare services, food. So this is essentially cuts to Medicare. This is cuts to SNAP. Whoop, I lost a page. This is cuts to student loan and education. These are cuts to investments in green energy. This is a cut. This is a little tough to explain. This is a loss of revenue, basically a loss of revenue because the state and local tax caps are not going to be taken away. In fact, they're going to be made permanent. If you want to talk about this more in depth, this is a little hard to understand. If you want to talk about this more in depth afterwards, we can get into that. But then here's the biggest one, which is the cuts to Medicaid. This one up here is other healthcare. This is the Medicaid cuts. So these cuts save some money, but it's not enough to offset all of this stuff. And you can have a copy. There's an article from the New York Times. I have a gift version of it here that you can look at when you get this to get the details on all of this stuff. So there's a link to that article. Now, just like I showed you Heather Cox Richardson's view of this thing, well, another fellow I follow is named Tim Dickerson. He's an award-winning political journalist, and he talks about this thing really being a reverse Robin Hood, stealing from the poor, giving to the rich. And his viewpoint is that there are extending tax breaks for the rich, depriving more than 10 million Americans of health insurance, axing $880 billion from Medicaid. He says that this is going to reduce the take-home income of the bottom 10%. Most households earning less than 50 grand will see their after-tax income decrease. If you make less than 50 grand, you're going to have less money to spend because of this bill. And if you earn at least 70,000 or more, then you start to see a little bit of benefit from this bill. That kind of makes good on his campaign promises. It offers temporary 3-year tax breaks on tips, on overtime, on auto loan interest, credit. There's a tax credit to seniors there. He talked about no taxes on Social Security. He can't do that through law. But what he did do is he put another tax credit to seniors meant to offset that. But that's still only a temporary thing. So in his view, it's got ugly provisions, many ugly provisions. And he's focused on 6 ugly provisions, undermining the rule of law. That provision in there that says you can't use federal money to enforce a court junction, that means the courts will be eviscerated. They can't do anything about Trump. There's a boondoggle in here for private schools where on the charitable side, the House bill creates a backdoor subsidy for private schools. Rich people who donate to nonprofits that hand vouchers to private schools will now receive not a tax deduction, which is usually capped at 35%, but a tax credit for all the money they're putting in. Every dollar donated to a private school is counted as a dollar paid in taxes. So that not only applies to the value of cash donations, but market value of stocks. In many cases, these donors could get more value out of their stocks by donating them to a school and taking all of that as an income tax payment. That's $23 billion over 10 years that they can now put into private schools instead of paying taxes. The idea that estate taxes are a death tax. State taxes are a way of ensuring we don't have a landed kind of a family dynasty that goes on for generations, inheriting wealth. Inherited wealth should be highly taxed in order to prevent the development of these oligarch families that could just run the country the way they want. And the big, beautiful bill indexes the current exemption to inflation, makes the tax break permanent. A rich couple will be able to pass $30 million to their descendants without paying a penny in taxes next year. The shortchange of kids of immigrants. If you're a kid of an immigrant, you can't get the benefits that a kid of a citizen can. Child tax credits currently available to children with Social Security numbers as long as their parents have a taxpayer ID number. This bill would increase the value of that credit to $2,500, but also require that the parent of the child claiming the credit has a Social Security number as a proxy for citizenship status. So a child who's a citizen who's getting benefits now, even though his parent is not a citizen, after this bill, that child won't be able to get federal benefits anymore. 2 million citizen children in mixed status households will lose federal support. That's a very ugly thing. One of the biggest changes is this imposing a work requirement. Supposedly able-bodied adults to maintain eligibility for Medicaid, they have to prove that they're working. They have to prove they're working at least 80 hours a month of work or some kind of volunteering. The implementation is left up to the states. Some of our states are committed to expanding health coverage, but others have been opposed to it. And the states that are opposed to it are going to use this stuff to make it harder to get health care. There's a maze of forms, bureaucratic hurdles to establish and maintain eligibility. Medicaid, it contains strict income tax. Recipients must prove they're poor. The big, beautiful bill makes it even worse. People who are kicked off of Medicaid by failing to navigate the requirements and getting all the reporting done, they'll be punished by becoming ineligible for ACA, for Obamacare plans. So by design, their Medicaid changes will eliminate coverage for 10 million people. And the same thing applies to food stamps. Once again, you have to meet these work requirements. Georgia tried to implement work requirements, and it turned out that the cost of administrating the work requirements, keeping track of who's working and who's not, and managing the reporting and all that stuff, that cost more money in administration than they saved by kicking some people off of welfare. So here's my viewpoint about work requirements. I see it as a moral judgment. Who's worthy of help? Who's not? If someone's working or not working, and we give them support, it costs the same. It's not cheaper for us to give support to somebody who's working. It doesn't help save money in our federal program if somebody's working. So if there's any savings, it's just because we deem someone who's not working to be not worthy of assistance, and we stop helping them. Oh, they aren't contributing to our society, so what? We're just going to let them die? That just sounds terrible to me. And since the cost of administering work requirements can wipe out some or all of the savings, let's not be judgmental about this. Let's not implement moral judgments about who's worthy and who's not. Let's help people who need help, period. That's how I see it. So this thing was passed in the middle of the night. It was forced through very quickly in the House. Why did they do that? They did that because it reduces the risk of defections, because people don't know what's going on. People can't see what's happening. They can't call their representative and tell them, don't vote for this thing. In fact, in many cases, the representatives don't even know what they're voting for. It's being pushed through quickly. That's why this thing was passed in the middle of the House, in the middle of the night. And a lot of the House members are worried about this. I mean, they're happy they pushed something through, but they're worried about what it's going to do to their people. They're worried about how close the vote was, and they're worried about what fiscal conservatives are going to say about this bill. The House members are kind of on pins and needles about this. They're worried about the deficit and debt concerns. They're worried about spending cuts that are going to hurt their voters. There are swing state districts and moderate Republicans who are going to be affected by the SALT cap changes. The people in the House are very concerned about this. They're happy they passed something, but the narrow margin of passage, public statements support for the bill is horrible. Public support for the bill is terrible, and rightfully so. That's because 43% of Americans opposed the bill last time I looked. Only 36% support it, 20% are unsure. And its partisan split is tremendous. Yeah, 3/4 of Republicans support the bill. 80% of Democrats oppose it. Independents, almost half are opposed. 27% support the bill. The House is rightfully concerned because they see they passed something that a lot of people don't like. The debt problems, 80% of our voters want lawmakers to consider the impact on our credit rating from the downgrade of this bill. 90% are concerned about the addition of trillions of dollars in national debt. So they're rightfully concerned. They're concerned about the impact of education. 75% of our people want government to help people be able to go to college if they want to, which is exactly the opposite of what this bill does. So even if the Senate softens the bill, here's why the House people are worried, and here's something the Democrats should take advantage of. Even if the Senate does soften this bill, the GOP House members are on record for voting for all this stuff. They are on record for voting to kill rural hospitals, for example. So that's going to come back to haunt them in the next election. And any politician worth his salt is going to be mentioning these things in the next election. Now, when it comes to the Senate, here's where we have an opportunity to do something, because it's not easy to get this thing through the Senate the way it is. There's a really narrow majority in the Senate, too. The Senate can the Republicans in the Senate can only afford to lose 3 votes. And there's at least 1 or 2 that are definitely against it. Ron Johnson and Rand Paul are up in arms about this thing. And there's going to be some major changes from the Senate. So we got to help make sure those changes go in the direction we want to see them go. And the major way we do that is with this thing called the Byrd Rule. You see, I mentioned that this whole thing is being done as a reconciliation bill. A reconciliation bill can get through the Senate without a filibuster, and that's by some rules that Senator Byrd put together that say what can be in a reconciliation bill. A reconciliation bill cannot have extraneous provisions that don't directly impact federal spending or the revenue. These reconciliation bills are supposed to be about the budget and only the budget. So there are several things in the House-passed bill, such as this thing about judicial power, gun regulation, abortion funding, AI regulation. Those things are at risk of being struck from the bill. But there's even more to it than that we'll get to. And any senator can call the Senate on this stuff. Any senator can raise a point of order and say, I want a ruling from the parliamentarian if this is appropriate to be in the bill or not. Now, they're working under a tight deadline. Let's see, I thought I missed something there. I'll get to it. They're working under a very tight deadline, and we have to hold our senators' feet to the fire. It's a very difficult path in the Senate. And I'll be telling you exactly what we should be saying to our senators about all this. Key provisions are going to be changed. They're going to be removed. They're going to be altered. And Thune running the Senate and Johnson running the House are going to have to get together and try and put together something that can pass the Senate and then come back to the House. I'm going to skip this part right now. You can read these later. The financial market is not reacting well to this stuff. And anybody who's retired should be worried about this. I'm going to skip this too. You can go back and read this. Musk has been giving Trump a lot of trouble in this area. He's really telling the country that this bill is bad news. So what can we do? The primary way we affect this bill is through a strict application of the Byrd rules for a reconciliation bill. What they say in the Senate is they give the bill a bird bath by removing parts of the bill that shouldn't be in there. So even the permanence of the Trump tax cuts may be kicked out by the parliamentarian. And that hinges on what we use as a baseline. You see, when you're passing a budget, you have to figure out if it makes things worse or not, you have to compare it to what came before. The Byrd rule requires that the bill in question not cause a budget deficit beyond 10 years. That, by the way, is why the first Trump tax cuts were temporary, Because if they made it permanent, it would have caused a budget deficit beyond 10 years. And the Byrd rules say you can't do that in a reconciliation bill. So when you're going to make a change in taxes, you have to compare the new one to a baseline. What the current tax rate is and what the new tax rate would be, and how much will that affect the deficit. And there's really two ways you can consider a baseline. One is what we call a current law baseline. The current law baseline says, well, the Trump tax cuts are going to expire. So making them permanent is a change to current law and will cause a deficit perhaps beyond 10 years. They're arguing right now that they should use a current policy baseline, not a current law baseline. The current policy baseline says, we already got these tax cuts in here. Just extending them doesn't change our current policy. So it's no change to deficit. And current policy baseline is a scam. Budget experts universally say current law baseline is the only thing that counts. Current law baseline, the current policy baseline undermines the entire principle of the Byrd rule. The Byrd rule intent is designed to prevent reconciliation bills from making really big deficits by requiring that nothing in there be, if there's any deficit in there, it's temporary and it can't go beyond a 10-year budget window. So current law versus current policy, traditionally Congress has always used a current law baseline. And a current policy baseline is something we've never done before, and it just completely eviscerates the whole reason why we have these Byrd rules. The current policy baseline would mask the true costs of our changes. A current policy baseline would assign no cost to these extensions, even though in reality they contribute to annual deficits that wouldn't be there under the current law. So current policy baseline is a scam. It's a gimmick. Our senators cannot accept it. Our senators must use a current law baseline in evaluating this thing. Long-term fiscal harm, fiscal watchdogs, budget experts, everybody says that it's a clear circumvention of the budget rules. It's widely condemned as a gimmick. So could the Senate just say, the heck with the Byrd rules, I'm going to ignore the Byrd rules? If the parliamentarian says this has got to kicked out, can I just ignore the parliamentarian? Well, any senator can raise a point of order requiring that the Byrd rules be upheld, and the Senate can vote on whether to honor the Byrd rule or not. But it takes 60 votes to override a Byrd rule. So they can't override a Byrd rule as long as our senators hold their feet to the fire. So our call to action is to contact your senator and insist that they demand strict adherence to the Byrd rules through a very thorough Senate Byrd bath. And that includes using a current law baseline, not a current policy baseline. Doing that could even stop the permanence of the Trump tax cuts, because the Trump tax cuts compared to current law baseline could well create a deficit beyond 10 years. And Thune, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, has publicly stated that he will not override the Senate parliamentarians' ruling. So we have to hold his feet to that fire. He said we're not going to do that. Our senators need to hold him to those principles. Call your senator. I've got a draft letter. Click there for the draft letter. It demands that our senators require a rigorous Byrd bath, insist on using current law baseline, question and challenge any provision not directly related to budget, and uphold the parliamentarians' decisions. On the next few slides, I'll show you the full text of the bill. So if you just want to type it in, or you can click on the link. Send it to your senators. Ask everybody you know to send this to your senators. It's a draft letter that said, I'm writing to urge you to ensure the highest standards of fiscal responsibility. First and foremost, and strongly insist that a thorough Byrd bath is imperative that the budget effective bill are scored against current law baseline. Urge you to respect the ruling of Senate parliamentarians. In summary, I ask you this, and that. Get this thing. Send it to your senators. Have everybody else send it to your senators. Our Senate can protect us to some extent from what the House has done and what the GOP is trying to do. And that's what I got to say to you today. I'm done. So, that was an hour. That was one of the longer ones.
Out of breath.
Do we still have 100? Do we still have 100 people on the call?
Yeah, there's still 200 people here.
Good. Okay, let me stop sharing screen and we can take questions.
You sure about that? You ready?
I'm ready. Yes,
All
I
right.
am.
All right. Give me one moment.
So are we just doing questions from the chat, or will we be asking people to raise their hands?
Why don't we start with the chat first?
Yeah.
Because some of them have started at like 7:21.
Yeah, let's try and get through the chat, then we'll take the hands.
All right. We have one from Garrick. It says, where are the cuts to the Department of Defense and Medicare Advantage?
No, there aren't any cuts to defense. And their proposal is to make Medicare Advantage the default process. By the way, Medicare Advantage is another scam. It's a way of taking our tax money and giving it to private healthcare organizations. We really should be cramped. If we want to, there's a lot of places where we could save money. And one of them is by ending Medicare Advantage and just funding Medicare the way it was originally designed.
Okay, my thoughts exactly, Ed. Thank you. Lauren is asking, can you elaborate on Pell Grants and FAFSA, given the money resides in the Department of Education, which is slated to be closed?
Well, I don't think that the money disappears. I mean, Congress allocates money. First of all, the idea that the Department of Education is slated to be closed, well, I'm not so sure about that. You see, the Department of Education is created by Congress, and the administration cannot eliminate it. The administration can try and disband it and disable it and fire everybody who works there. But Congress will still come back and say, we are allocating some money to this and we insist that you spend it. And then people will go to court and say, Congress has said you got to spend this money. So even though there's going to be some delays, there probably still will be Pell Grants. But what they're doing is they're increasing the required course load. It used to be you could go to school half time and you'd be qualified for a Pell Grant. Heck, I got a Pell Grant when I went to school because I was the son of a Chicago cop and we didn't have a lot of money in the family. Now they're going to say you got to be closer to a full-time student in order to qualify for a Pell Grant. So people that are working and going to college and using Pell Grants to help them pay for it are going to have a harder time now because they won't qualify for a Pell Grant. That's what I know about the Pell Grants.
Okay. Nora is asking, I read that the cuts to Medicaid won't go into effect until December of 2026.
That's not in the bill.
Of
that's not in the bill.
Okay.
It's specifically Trump insisted that the cuts happen right away. And the bill says those cuts start right now. Yes, they tried an end around there to not let the cuts happen until after the next election so that people wouldn't feel any pain. But Trump vetoed that. So no, those cuts happen right away now.
Oh my gosh, not good. Rick is asking, what are the best strategies to prevent the big, beautiful bill passing through the Senate, or better still, kill it?
I think we've covered that already in the presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Lauren is asking, what is the process for getting policy decisions out of this bill? I think we kind of
I believe we've answered it, but in summary,
yes,
a reconciliation bill is only supposed to have things that are primarily related to budget. Anything which is a policy decision that's only tangentially related to budget violates the Byrd rule, should not be in a reconciliation bill. Any senator can call for a parliamentarian judgment on that. Hopefully our parliamentarian will be honest, and they have been in the past. Thune has said that he's going to respect the parliamentarian. So things like changing the excise tax on gun silencers hopefully will be removed from this bill by the Senate, because it would take a vote of 60 senators to override the parliamentarian, and the Democrats aren't going to go along for any of that stuff.
Okay, because also she has a part after the question that says, I understand there is language for killing pensions for federal workers unless they agree to a 9% salary decrease. Essentially, they would self-fund their pension. So I don't know.
I didn't see that in the bill. Let me take a note on that, and I will do a little bit of research and verify whether that's in the bill or not. And I'll make a comment on that in when we send out the slides. I'll make a comment on that. And hang on a second, I just want to take a note on that.
Oh, that's fine.
Here. What did you say? This is federal pensions, right?
Yes, she says, I understand there is language for killing pensions for federal workers unless they agree to a 9% salary decrease. Essentially, they would self-fund their pension.
Yeah, okay. I will look into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Mark is asking, what is meant by permanent?
Well, as I mentioned, the reconciliation rules, the Byrd rules say that you can't pass a budget that is going to create a deficit that extends more than the budget window, which is typically 10 years. So they allow you to create a temporary deficit to handle an emergency situation or something. You know, we're having a pandemic. We got to spend a lot of money right now, but we're going to get back to responsible fiscal policies after this emergency is over. So, and in fact, the initial Trump tax cuts were limited to a certain number of years because that's how they avoided the Byrd rule that says you can't have a tax cut that will last longer. You can't have a deficit that will extend beyond the 10-year limit. So right now what they want to do is they want to just say, well, though, you know, those tax cuts we made in the first administration that only last 8 years and are about to expire, we just want to remove the expiration date so that those tax cuts will be a permanent part of our tax code going forward. That's permanent. And some of the other things they're saying, no tax on tips, for example, that's not permanent. That we're going to have no tax on tips for the next 3 years. But after 3 years, you're going to have tax on tips again. So that's the difference between permanent and temporary.
Okay, now I'm laughing at this one for a little bit. Judy is asking, where did they hide the 300 million for 47 to play golf for the next year? Sorry.
Well, I'm sure that's in
Crypto.
No. That's in the Secret Service that provides protection for him and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh
Go
my
ahead.
goodness. Okay, Lauren is questioning. Okay, has anyone created a waterfall chart so we can easily see which areas had cuts and how much along with what areas received more money and how much? The math isn't
Yes.
mathing, you know, behind their claim of cutting waste while raising the debt ceiling.
Okay, so let me just share screen for a moment and answer that question. If you go back to I got to change focus here. Hang on. You go back to this slide here. That one. I believe that answers the question in being asked. If you click on this link, you'll see a long survey which talks about all the red stuff, exactly where we're spending more money. I did that again. And all the blue stuff for where we're saving some money. I think this is the kind of chart. I'm not sure exactly what a waterfall chart is, but I think this chart provides the kind of information that the person was asking for.
Okay.
And you're going to get these slides.
Beth is asking, where will the states get money to deal with people without health insurance? Where will the health care facilities get money to care for the unit under financed persons?
Well, they won't. I mean, some states have some capabilities. California, New York, Illinois have some capabilities to continue providing some revenue. A state like Mississippi, you know, there's probably 11 states that provide 80% of the GDP of the United States. Those 11 states have the ability to raise some taxes and get some money out of their population and their businesses and help their population. The other 39 are just screwed. those are the areas where you're going to see tons of people losing health insurance. You're going to see hospitals closing. The states don't have an ability. I mean, one of the important things about our nation is that the states help one another. I mean, the states that have good economies help the states that don't have a great economy because we need them. We need the rural states. They're where our farms are. We need the rural states. We want to go visit them for vacations. We need the diversity of this country. And when we work together as a nation with the richer states helping the poorer states, we have a great country. And when the federal government decides we're not going to do that anymore, and we're not going to move money from richer states to poorer states because we're not going to allow taxes to come from richer states and go to poorer states, we're not as great a nation as we used to be. And those parts of our nation that are on the short end of the stick are going to suffer a lot. And we don't want to see that happen.
Okay, now Lori has a question. It says, do prisoners still get medical? Which I believe they still do, but that's her question, and I don't know if it's before or after.
I don't know. My understanding, my gut feeling on that is that the medical care that's delivered to prisoners is funded by the State Bureau of Prisons, not by Medicaid or Medicare or any of that stuff. So I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think that's the answer there.
Okay, next question is a approximate 5 to 6 parter from Rick. So
great.
Yes, I kind of thought you would like that. But the first one says, what are the 20 top best talking points that indivisible marchers can use on No King's Day to oppose the big, beautiful bill?
I don't have an answer for that, but Rick, I'm sure you can get your AI to come up with those things pretty easily. Come on.
Oh gosh. Okay, number 2. What strategies could be used to block or delay the bill's passage in the Senate? Are we talking the bird
I think we've covered
rule?
that. I think we've covered that.
Yes. Okay. Number 3. How can senators raise points of order to challenge bill provisions?
Okay, that to repeat the process there is any senator can raise a point of order to request a decision from the parliamentarian as to whether a specific item is in concurrence with the Byrd rule or not. Any senator can do this. And we need to make sure that our Democratic senators are doing this as much as possible. And I think that is the primary process there. And once again, if the parliamentarian says that this is not allowed under the Byrd rules, it would take 60 senators to override that decision.
Okay. Number 4 pertains to, I think, the Byrd rule. It says, how might the Byrd rule delay or block legislation? Which
we've covered
I believe would, yes. Okay, number 5, how might filibusters or extended debate slow the bill's progress?
There's no filibuster available for a reconciliation bill. Extended debate, that's something that's under the control of the GOP leadership. And I don't know the answer there. I worry that the GOP leadership in the Senate will try and push this through as quickly as possible. I mean, they can't do it in a couple of overnights the way the House did. The Senate just doesn't work that way. But we need to make sure our senators take every opportunity to question this bill, to question the restrictions of the Byrd rules, and to make sure it gets a full and fair hearing so that the people in the nation can more fully understand. I mean, we can do what we do to help people, but when senators can be asking questions in the Senate and getting answers that will be covered in the news, that will get a lot more coverage than what we do. But yes, this thing is not anywhere near a slam dunk in the Senate, nowhere near it.
Okay. Another last question, and then there's a little excerpt afterwards, so bear with me. It says, how might Senate procedural votes like vote-a-rama be exploited to delay passage?
I don't have a clear answer on that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
And Rick, we'll get back to you towards the end to cover any additional questions you have.
Well, just to let you know, he says I will provide AI links to these questions. So,
oh, great. Put
yeah,
him
so
in the chat. Put him in the chat. The chat goes out to everybody too, along with the slides.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, we have a question from Celeste. Aren't billionaires concerned about the financial impact of the losses caused by the cuts to funds that their businesses depend on? Won't have a domino effect?
Well, yes. I mean, that's the whole point of that's one of the points of Musk's rampage about all this stuff.
Yes.
But frankly, what there's two main concerns that businesses have about this stuff. One is more based on the tariffs than on this bill, because the tariffs the whole uncertainty around the tariffs mean that no business can do any business planning, and they're not going to make any investment. They're just going to sit on their money until it becomes clear what's going to happen with these tariffs. But the other thing about this bill is that there is a huge concern in Wall Street that the deficit increase in this bill will trigger an increase, a loss of confidence in the reliability of Treasury notes. Treasury notes, investments in our government, are supposed to be the safest investment in the world. And we can sell Treasury notes with a relatively low interest rate because they're so safe. Well, if the investment community looks at our burgeoning deficit and decides that we're not being fiscally conservative, we're not being a serious country, they will demand a higher interest rate to buy our bonds. And that will raise interest rates in this country. It will hurt people who have investment portfolios of bonds. And it will lower the value of the US dollar. And these are concerns that our business community has, much more than will Trump cut their subsidies. A lot of businesses can kowtow to Trump and make deals with Trump and get their subsidies back to some extent, unless they're in the green industry, which Trump doesn't want to spend any money on at all. But those are the areas that the business are mostly concerned about are the uncertainty over tariffs and the impact of a burgeoning deficit on our economic life.
Okay. Mark's question is, how will the courts allow this decrease of their constitutional power?
Well, there's nothing in the bill that can possibly change their constitutional power. The Constitution grants powers to Congress, to the courts, to the administration. Bodies can give up their power. Congress is currently giving up their power to Trump. Congress could have stopped these tariffs, and they chose not to. The court is giving up some of their power by granting immunity to the president. So these bodies are choosing to give up power for political reasons. In Congress, they're doing it because GOP leadership wants to see these cuts, and they know they can't get them through Congress. So they're letting Trump do them because that way they get them done, even though they'll never get them through Congress. The courts are doing what the courts are doing mostly because we've allowed the political process to push the court so far to the right. So one other thing I'll say about this is we all understand that in theory, modifying our Constitution is difficult. You got to get a congressional amendment passed, and then it's got to be ratified by 3/4 of the states. But in truth, every time the Supreme Court reinterprets some part of our Constitution, that is effectively modifying our Constitution. I mean, we used to think for 50 years, we used to think we had reproductive rights until we didn't. There was no amendment process to make that change. It's just the court snapping its fingers and saying, nope, this doesn't mean that anymore. Now it's something else. So the courts can effectively change the ratio of power and the movement of power to the administration is a real problem for our democracy, a real problem. This part that's in the bill that says the courts cannot fund enforcement action, that's disastrous. That's got to come out. The courts won't have any power over the federal government if that doesn't come out.
Right. Okay. Nora's question is, if you're disabled and a senior, do you stand a better chance of getting some Medicaid benefits?
I think so. I think that the work requirements do not impact people who are disabled. The work requirements all say able-bodied people have to prove that they're working. So this doesn't, I don't believe this affects Medicaid or it affects SSI, Social Security for disabled. But it's going to affect a lot of people.
Yes. Okay. Chris is asking, if the worst happens and the bill is passed as it is now, would a future president undo the cuts?
Well, Congress would have to undo the cuts. The president doesn't do this stuff. This stuff is done by Congress. A future Congress could undo the cuts. Yes, absolutely. And it seems to me that if this bill is passed exactly the way it is, that there's going to be so much pain in rural communities that the next couple of elections are much more likely going to go towards a Congress that will restore some of this, a lot of this stuff.
Okay, Nora's question here. Could they end up not agreeing to any resolution bill and just pass a continuing resolution?
Well, I don't think that's likely. I think that they're going to pass something. They have the majority in both houses. If they can get the leadership in both houses to agree on something that they can shove down the throats of members of both houses, they'll get something through. I doubt that they're going to end up with just another CR.
Okay. And this is the last question, unless somebody puts some in the chat after 7:58. So Lauren is asking, is there any possibility of the big brutal bill being thrown out, allowing for a do-over?
Well, not really. No. I mean, there's one of the problems is we're running up against time limits, especially with respect to the debt limit. The House has done what the House is. The way this is going to go down, the House did what the House is going to do. The House is not going to start over. The Senate is going to do something. They're going to change this bill quite a bit. And then the Senate and House leadership are going to get together and try and figure out a compromise between what the Senate wants and what the House wants that they can get both houses to pass. Now, that probably will water down a lot of the stuff in this bill. But they'll find a way to jam it through, and there will be a bill here. But we need the Senate to take out the worst parts, the stuff that isn't strictly budget oriented. We need the Senate to make sure they use the right baseline, and it may very well end up that they can't do the complete extension of the tax cuts using a right baseline. So then they might do another extension instead of making them permanent. They'll do something. They'll do something that will still hurt us all, and maybe not as much as the original House bill would hurt us. And that's why we got to lean on the Senate so hard.
Okay, Ed, I found another question. Yeah, I found one last question. Hold
okay,
on.
and we got to get some of the people with their hands up.
Yes. Okay, last question in the chat that I found is the parliamentarian considered neutral or friendly to the Republicans? From Donna.
My understanding of the parliamentarian is very neutral. It's a very professional organization, and I don't think that we're going to see any bias coming out of the parliamentarian. The real risk is that somebody might decide they want to try and ignore the parliamentarian, and I don't think that's going to happen. Although there have been some tricks done recently to bypass filibusters that I don't want to get into now. So, when Thune says he's going to respect the parliamentarian, we have to trust but verify. We have to make damn sure he's right. Okay, let's go to the questions. With hands up.
First one's from Donna Miller. Donna, I'm asking you to go ahead and unmute. There should be something. There you go. Tell us where you're from and ask your question.
You just answered my question. I was asking about the parliamentarians leaning. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Let's move ahead.
Okay, next one is Rick.
Rick, you got some more questions?
No. Actually, I was using AI throughout your presentation, Perplexity. And so my questions were redundant because I was anticipating where I thought you might go. But I did the top 20 reasons to talking points about the big brutal bill. And I did it across all the search engines and asked to compile it, which I've done in an article which I've just published on LinkedIn, as well as a notebook summary of it, which I haven't listened to, which is actually about 35 minutes long. So
you put you put links to that into the chat?
I put it into the chat, and I also want to put in the chat on Wednesday night, we're going to be doing a session on how to use chants, songs, and also we have to create a new meme to be taking on the MAGA meme. We need a meme, and I've got a suggestion there, but I'm going to crowdsource the crowd to say, what's the meme that we can get behind that will put MAGA in the political trash can? I'm Rick, and I'm done speaking.
So we'll do that. We'll do that Wednesday night then. I won't be able to come Wednesday night. We have our last even song of the season on Wednesday night.
I'll move on to Garrick. Go ahead, unmute Garrick and tell us where you're from.
Got to unmute, Garrick. There you go.
Yep, I'm getting there. Hi, all. I'm Garrick from South Elgin, Illinois. I have a twofold question and a follow-up about the parliamentarian. How much of the federal budget goes to handouts like fossil fuel industry and pharmaceutical? And was there any language in this bill to address this, whether up or down?
So the amount that goes out to those kind of things is not very large. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I know that it's not really a very significant number. Let me take a note on that, and I will get an answer for that for you and send it out when we send out the slides. Let's see. How much money do we spend subsidizing energy production? What was the other part of that?
Garrick, I got to unmute you again. Go ahead.
What was the other part of that, Garrick?
Garrick, you keep muting yourself.
The other part was, is there anything in the bill changing any of that? And is there anything in the bill changing any of that?
My follow-up question, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My follow-up question, what are the qualifications for this parliamentarian, and how and who appoints them?
Well, the qualifications are you have to understand the Robert's Rules of Order very, very well. And that's a very complex subject. I mean, I've been in conventions where you got to follow the Robert's Rules of Order to run the operation. And the person running the operation is constantly talking to the politician. Can I ask him that? Is it okay for us to take that vote? So these people are professionals at how to run a formal process, and they're generally apolitical. The Senate hires them. The Senate votes to hire them. So they're hired on a bipartisan basis. I could get a little more information about that for you as part of what I send out. Let's have some details
that'd be
on
great,
the parliamentarian choice. Okay,
that'd be great, because that is one faction of government that I don't understand.
It's a critical role, and I'll provide some information on that for you. Let's go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, Ed, I've got a question. In the calculation for the debt, has the downgrade in our credit rating been taken into account in any of those forecasts?
No. I don't believe so. The CBO looks at the impact on revenue and expenses, and I don't think that so the downgrade of our debt, would only impact our interest rate cost,
Right.
and I don't think that the CBO is scoring that, because that's, it just happened, and it's not definitive that the downgrading the debt is going to cause an interest rate increase. But I'll tell you, the financial markets are very concerned about that, and whenever that's raised with the GOP leadership, they dismiss it. They don't believe that it's a serious concern.
Thanks, Ed. Tamara, you're up, and go ahead, unmute yourself. Tell everybody where you're from and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And good evening. This is Tamara. I'm in Northwest Indiana along the Lake Michigan shores. I'm a professional advocate, and I've been active with your group and with Bill's organization for a few months now, and appreciate the dialogue. Ed, I appreciate your work on this. I'm a former staff person myself on Capitol Hill, so I've worked on a number of reconciliation measures. This one, of course, is of historic proportions. And my question is, since you had a chance to go over the document and look at some supporting information, in the area of two House committees, Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce, they both have joint jurisdiction on Medicare and Medicaid. Section A is handled by Ways and Means, and B, C, and D is Energy and Commerce. My question is, did you see any kind of notation? I've been looking for it myself on any of the managers who manage the bill, I should say, in both committees prior to it passing in the House, on recommendations to go after Medicare on alleged, waste and fraud, because they're using that as the argument in the Senate. The Senate Republicans agreed last week to reopen the chapter on Medicare. And I just was inquisitive to know, since you were working on this for a while before your presentation tonight, have you seen any other specific reference to that? I'm working on it separately, but I just was inquisitive to know if you've come across any information.
The references I have seen talk about waste and fraud, and they try and make the case that the waste or fraud is related to undocumented people receiving Medicaid coverage. That is the story. That is the major story that I hear coming out of the House leadership and the committees, which is bullshit. It's nonsense, because there's no federal money spent on undocumented Medicaid recipients. Any money spent on undocumented Medicaid recipients is state money. It's not federal money. So but I hear that story consistently, and that's really the only story I hear, that they are cutting waste and fraud, and primarily with respect to undocumented recipients.
Yeah, that pertains to Medicaid because of the income adjusted status of that program. But I guess I was asking about Medicare, which is the more generic program that many Americans are part of, and get, especially those that have taken, earlier retirement and they're eligible now. There's a discussion there. They're going into that account. And if you remember, 2-3 weeks ago, the president said they weren't going to touch Medicare. Now they've gone back on their word, and soon has said that they're looking at parts of that provision, which is, of course, very separate from Medicaid. But I just didn't know if you've seen anything else on documentation on that.
No, I have not. The House didn't talk a lot about Medicare. The Senate is acting like they want to offset the tax deficit with even more cuts to social services, which is something I'm sure they could sell to the House. But there's a lot of conservative members who aren't interested in seeing additional cuts to social services. folks like
Yeah,
Ron
and I mean,
Johnson.
Medicare is the backbone, just like Social Security is for millions of Americans. So I would hope that groups become a bit outraged about this and get through to these senators, because there is no trust level here right now. I mean, I've been talking to Democrats and Republicans the last 10 days, and they say that this is real in terms of this, going in to whittle away on the Medicare side. And where it could be on supplemental services that many people get through Medicare for preventative healthcare purposes, that could really impact people who are not ACA qualified, that may have been, part of the Medicare program since they became eligible. So
Yeah.
I guess if I find out anything more, I'll share it with Bill and then share it with you, Ed, because I know you've done a very good deep dive on this and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, but I think that we need to leverage your expertise more than we have. You've been you've been involved in these kinds of bills. You certainly have expertise that I do not have. So we're going to try and keep you involved in this kind of stuff. Thank you, Tamara.
Sure, you're welcome. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, very interested, Tamara. Is that part A or part B? And when they talk about Medicare, or both?
Yeah. Well, the thing is on A, it's a bit more extensive. B, C, and D, they have different subtitles on that, Jim. And that's where it becomes a bit more of question on Medicare itself, not Medicaid, right? But Medicare, because that's more the generic piece that was designed to supplement Social Security in the days before people had an access to universal health care coverage, right?
Yeah,
And
and it's
so,
probably not A. It's probably not A
yeah,
because A is separate. A is separately funded. B, the other
yeah.
ones are funded through the general revenue fund, and those are the areas where they would be looking to make cuts.
Yeah, and just, I don't want to extend this too long, but just to give you an example, Ed and Jim, there was a discussion earlier last week by a participant who called in during, I believe, the after hours program. And she was a woman who is diabetic. And she was told by her podiatrist, because folks with that condition often have to seek a podiatrist for foot care, for safety, right? And she was told by her doctor that he was not going to be able to serve her anymore because of what will be happening with Medicare, and that she'd have to go to another source. And you could tell she was obviously extremely concerned. I called a couple of different nonprofits, Ed, just to see what their take on it was, because that's really in the weeds. But that may very well be what they're looking at, because there's ways that they can whittle it down with the numbers on this. So, my experience with other reconciliation bills, they were a little different. This one, of course, is so self-encompassing that they get this through. It's going to be everything that it was part of that original, presidential plan, under Project 25,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. So,
Okay.
so I'll keep
Okay.
you
Thank
guys
you.
posted. Yeah. Thanks,
All right.
Ed.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jim.
We're running over, so let's try and get through the remaining questions pretty quickly here.
Sure. Dr. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Ed. Great presentation. I had a question regarding the Medicaid cuts are so significant. I wonder if there's any way to demonstrate that even when they start looking at the piece where they're talking about the back to work requirements, I've seen several articles that say the math doesn't math. Even if we consider that the amount that has to be cut doesn't add up. Is there any way to kind of peel the onion back on that so we can expose it? I mean, did you see any charts related to that? Is there any way that we can really crunch the numbers to say it doesn't add up?
Well, I mean, on their side, it's all a bunch of hand waving, right? They expect the measures they're putting in place will save this amount of money, and it's just a guess on their part. And as you say, if there are people who've done an analysis on that and it doesn't seem to add up, that's the best we have at the moment. I haven't seen those analyses. If you could forward any analysis like that you have seen to me, I would love to take a look at it. Okay.
It's mostly been in articles and they reference it, but I will check. And the one other alibi is I did do an AI search regarding the amount of subsidies for fossil fuel versus green energy. And the fossil fuel subsidies are still very significant. And I think, when I go to meet with my Congressman, Chip Roy, I plan to address that specifically because I think that's a drug deal with the oil companies here in Texas.
I understand that, but when we say something is significant, please understand that there's really only four things that are significant in our expenses in this government: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense. That's pretty much the whole ball of wax.
Yeah, I was comparing it to the green energy subsidies because my point to him is we need to not lose the green energy subsidies. So yeah, I agree with what you said. I mean, there's not going to be billions and trillions of dollars found in these areas, but I'm saying it's almost comparable to what the green energy subsidies are. So that's
great.
It.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Chuck, go ahead. Unmute. Tell us where you're from.
Okay.
Ask
Hey,
your que-
first of all, I've seen the interviews with Republicans, and they all claim there will be no cuts whatsoever to Medicaid. And secondly,
right.
my question was, how is it that Trump can order a parade? Where does he get the money from? That's all.
Yeah, well, it comes out of the defense budget, of course. I mean, the money for the parade is a very, very tiny part of the defense budget. So, I was listening to the radio today. They're trying to figure out if they can put steel plates down on the streets so that the streets will not be chewed up by the tanks that are heavier than the weight limit on the streets. It's a pretty funny situation. We'll see if there are protesters that try and stand out in front of the tanks, like in China. Stop the tank.
So he controls all budgets. Defense, everything. He controls them all. I thought money expenditures had to be done through Congress. I don't get it.
Well, okay. So here's what to get. Congress votes to spend money for certain things.
Yeah.
And the administration is charged with doing what Congress told them to do. And Trump says, heck with you, Congress. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to spend the money the way I think it should be spent, not the way you told me to spend. And all we can do is go to the courts and say, courts, will you please tell to Trump that he's got to do what Congress wants? So, the separation of powers stuff can be abused and is being abused by this president.
Could Congress, if they wanted to, stop it?
Absolutely. Congress had for example, Congress had the ability to stop the tariffs cold, and they chose not to. They chose to give up that power to the president. So Congress certainly can weigh in with the courts. Congress could file briefs with the courts saying, absolutely, the courts have to stop Trump from ignoring us. They're not doing that. They're standing by and letting Trump do these things. And the reason they're doing it is because the GOP leadership always wanted to do this stuff and they could never get it passed through Congress. So they're just letting Trump do it by himself.
We'll move on. Okay. We've got two more.
Thanks, Chuck.
Got Andrada. Go ahead, unmute. Tell us where you're from. Ask your question.
Hi, Andrada, Texas. Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, North Fort Worth. And just very quickly, I know we are pressed for time, but just to kind of piggyback on what I apologize, Tamara and Dr. Weld, who I believe is also in Texas as well. And it is the piece of how to really break it down and share it in layman terms. My apologies. I'm an accountant. I'm not at an executive level, but I'm in leadership. I've worked for a municipality but mostly in nonprofit, but have a lot of background in federal funding, grants, as well as local grants. Moving past that, main point and main question is how to really break it down to people, because we have clearly many people have noticed a severe decline in education, ability to comprehend, ability to master the language. I'm no one to speak. Obviously, English is my third language. I've lived in the U.S. the better half of my life. I'm a citizen, but still, regardless, idea is, how to propagate it, how to break it down. We're talking about charts. I love the charting. I love the chart that you had. It was about 20 slides before the ending slide. Great. So that is my first question. Is there a way? I think at some point you mentioned that, hey, we don't have the resources. We don't have the people. Yeah, that's the slide. So I've got you on my phone. I've got you projected on my TV through the YouTube app as well. So thank you. If there's a delay, that's probably why. Yes, that is a chart. I'm trying to go really fast. If I need to pace myself, I will. I just want to take as little time as possible away from you. So first, how do we break this down? If there aren't any resources, I will be happy to volunteer myself. I can get raw data. If I can get numbers in raw numbers, I can manipulate them, in Excel and a combination with ChatGPT as well, and using my experience. I wanted
Andretta, can we let Ed answer the question? And
yes, my apologies.
wait a minute. Would you give Ed your contact information?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's take most of this offline. As far as how we break it down, I think there's two things to break down here. One is the financial side, and this chart right here is the best summary I've got on the financial side to show where they're cutting, where they're saving money, and where they're losing revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that we've got to focus on is these items that are in the House bill that shouldn't be there. The things about abortion, the things about gun silencers, the things about limiting our courts, all those things are things that damage our democracy, and they have no business being in a budget bill. So we need to make those 2 points to people, and that's, to me, how we break it down. But as far as you're helping us with stuff like this, my email is on the front of this slide deck. You're going to get this slide deck. You're going to have my email. Let's get in touch through email, and we can talk about working together. Thanks, you.
Andretta. Last question from Debbie. Go ahead.
Yes, I will close it out. Ed, I need your input on this. Going from SSI disability to retirement, how is retirement going to be affected because of these aspects?
Well, I mean, they say that base SS is not affected, but it is affected by the cuts they've made. It's harder to get somebody on the phone. It's harder to sign up. It's harder to get an appointment. People will not have the benefits they should have because they can't get the services that they need to administer the thing. The other thing is that the other thing that those of us who are retired need to understand is that financial mismanagement by the government is going to affect your retirement income. If you have a bond fund and interest rates go way up, your bond fund is going to go down. If you have stocks and international relations get terrible somehow, and there's another shooting war someplace, your stocks are going to go down. The way Trump manages our government impacts your financial life and retirement, both through SS and through other impacts on our economy. One of the members of my household works for the Veterans Association, and I'm just praying to God that he doesn't get laid off, because if he gets laid off, it's going to make an impact on my household. So there's a lot of ways that what's going on now can impact all of us, retired or not. And that I hope that answers your question.
Well, not to interrupt you, but what it is that when you're on SSI disability, when you turn 62, they make you take retirement. And that's kind of like where I'm at. I'm on retirement now because of disability, SSI disability. So how is that retirement going to be affected? The same way or a slightly different way?
Well, I mean, the fact that you're required to take early retirement at 62 is not great, because but if you're not working and paying in anyway, that explains why they want you to do that. But no, there's nothing in the bill that specifically right now, there's nothing in the House bill that specifically affects Social Security, other than the fact that they're cutting the administrative staff. I have a note to look at what the Senate is doing about Social Security. Certainly, if they do something that hits Social Security, it would affect you when you transition from SSI to early retirement. But,
Already did.
I'll take a look
Already
at that.
did.
Okay.
So that's why I'm
All right.
asking.
Okay.
Bill,
Well,
Bill, do you want to
thank
take
you.
it? Bill, do you want to take it and close it out?
Yeah.
Yes, I would. Thank you so much, Ed. And just a note, thank you for sending the slides to me, Ed. I have sent those to everybody that RSVP'd using our Mobilize link, the one that we send out, not the Zoom link, but the Mobilize link when you sign up. So it's over almost 410 people that we just sent those slides out to. So those are out. I just wanted to let everybody know we've got some fun things that are happening tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Excuse me. Yeah, at 4 o'clock to 7, we have our Indivisible Gather Pizza Night at Moretti's in Mount Prospect. So if you're in the area, please stop by. Free pizza, free pop for a couple, 3 hours. Also, if you are on Zoom, you can attend the 4 o'clock sorting soup. That's the new program that Dr. Chris and KZ Illinois, Cecilia are doing. And that's going to be looking at what we're talking about on our coffee and conversation and taking the key items and making action plans on those. So that should be good. For those of you who attend the pizza night, then we're going to take a couple of boxes of pizza over to make posters at Kathy Nietzsche's place. So that should even be more fun. Pizza and posters. I can't think of anything better. And then Wednesday, just to complete your day, at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a hands-on session on how to do a Zoom. It's very elementary. I'll be learning, etc. If you have experience in Zoom, send me a note. I've got in the very bottom of all the recaps I send out is my numbers, and just say I'd like to be part of the panel, and we'll do this hands-on, and then Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central, Rick is going to be doing the No Kings songs and chants. And it looks like it's really going to be a fun event. It'll leverage off of the event we had at the end of last month, which just became fun. And so it'll be songs, chants, and many breakout rooms. So it should just be just super. So onward and forward. And that's everything we got. Don't forget about No King's Day. It's coming. It's Saturday. Attend many of them if you can. I did get a couple notices from some chapters who are doing Zoom No Kings. So I'll get more information on that. And tomorrow morning, I'll be talking about those chapters that are doing that. So anyway, Ed, thank you so much. This was great. You had 300 and some people sign up. You had 220 on the call.
Wow.
Typically, we have a 50% flake rate. That means twice as many people sign up that show up for these Zooms. This is amazing, and the fact that it didn't start dropping until about 20 minutes ago during the question and answer shows that our community here is highly engaged to want to know what this bill is going to do. And thank you so much for having those slides about what we can do. Those are action oriented. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everybody that's on. Any last words, Ed?
Nope. Thank you all for being here today. Send those letters. Have everybody you know send those letters. We got to lean on our senators right now.
Will we get the presentation tomorrow?
The slide decks have already been sent out.
Okay, thanks.
There are only 122 slides. Holy cow. All right, everybody. Have a great evening.